Today's guest is Joe Sanok, who is a speaker, therapist, business consultant, and podcaster. Joe has the #1 podcast for counselors, the Practice of the Practice podcast, with interviews with Pat Flynn, Lee Dumas, Chris Ducker, Rob Bell, Glennon Doyle Melton, and Lewis Howes. Joe is a rising star in the podcasting world. Joe is also a writer for PsychCentral. He's been featured on the Huffington Post, Reader's Digest, Bustle, and Yahoo News. He is a keynote speaker, author of 5 books, and is also a top consultant. Hey, Joe, how's it going today?
Hey, Brian, this is awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, man. It's quite an honor to have you on the show today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome. Then let's just dive straight in. Just if you can share a little bit with the audience, what's your story of how you became a therapist and maybe the beginning stages of that journey?
Yeah, the beginning stages goes back a while. In 2nd grade, I wrote a paper about how I wanted to be a psychologist. And when everyone else wanted to be a firefighter or actors or basketball players, I wanted to be a psychologist. My dad was a school psychologist. And so I got to see a lot of the freedom he had in that and the human mind. And one of my earliest memories is doing all sorts of intelligence testing where he would do intelligence testing on me. So I always found counseling and therapy really interesting. But then in graduate school, I really explored what was it that I was interested in versus what I thought maybe my dad was interested in. So I was less interested in the testing and the school side of it and really into the experiential approaches to therapy side. So every paper I wrote in grad school was about backpacking therapy and all sorts of different things like that. And then my first job out of grad school, I worked for a shelter for kids that had, for one reason or another, been removed from their home and got to do a lot of experiential approaches to therapy, team building activities. And then a couple years later, it was 2009, I launched a therapeutic sailing program where we took kids out sailing on this old pirate ship basically and did therapy on the sailboat. And that was really, it's it all came together. All of my interests around nature and outdoors and healthy living and teaching these kids how to make their own meals on this boat. And just, there's something about turning the motor off when you're on a sailboat and it's just quiet. And these kids, they just, in just a couple days, we had an 80% reduction in their psychological symptoms in both intensity and frequency. And it really just, that's where I felt like counseling really came alive for me. And we can talk more about my private practice and more of my journey. But that's my backstory in regards to being able to just really kind of connect within the counseling field.
That's amazing. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's true. Right? In those moments of, I can get the visuals of when you're on the sailboat and you turn off the motor, and it's a very beautiful description of that experience. So I appreciate that. Yeah,
and the kids, a lot of these kids were from foster care and the judicial system. They've not had a lot of power in their lives, a lot of control. And this boat was so big, there's no way you could sail it yourself. You couldn't put up the sails, you couldn't even hoist it. You wouldn't be strong enough. So they had to work together. It was forced team building because otherwise you just kind of bob in the water. And you had to have someone at the helm, someone, at the sails. You had to pay attention to the wind direction. And so for them to have this control of this boat, the only replica of which the Kennedy family owned, it was a really big honor for them. And you just saw them go from feeling like life happens to me and I have no power over that to, well, I really could have some power in my life because I just ran this sailboat for a whole week. And by the end, I don't even need the captain's help.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so that was 2009 around that time. And when did you actually decide to go into private practice for yourself?
Yeah, so I had done private practice at a group practice a couple years before that, where it was just kind of a side gig while I worked at Community Mental Health. My wife and I moved back to Traverse City in 2009. It's our hometown. It's this beautiful northern Michigan town. And so I started that program, was working as a foster care supervisor at that time, and launched the private practice really as a side gig to finish paying off my student loans. We had just, probably $10,000 left at that point to pay it off because we had been super aggressive in paying it down. And all the insurance panels were full. And so I had this mindset of I should get on insurance, but they were all full. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to just launch a private practice anyway. I put up a website. I found a space that I could lease as a percentage of what I brought in rather than have to have a commitment every month, and just opened my doors and was like, I'll just see what happens. And I got my first client, and then I got a second client, and clients kept coming. And then finally the insurance panels opened up, and I'm like, I don't really want to be on your insurance panels because I remember what that paperwork used to be like. So that whole time, though, I was working my full-time job. I got a job at the community college as a counselor. It was like that golden ticket where you get state pension benefits, you get the great health insurance. It was just like the ideal counseling job. But my practice kept growing. And I want to say it was 2013, my income there at my private practice matched my income at my 40-hour-a-week job. So I was working like 10 hours a week there. At that point, I had 3 clinicians working for me while I was working at my full-time job. And then the next year, I made almost twice as much. And so it became really clear that it was time for me to really look at an exit plan, because I'm like, if I can make this much working 10 to 15 hours a week, what would happen if I dedicated all of my life into this?
Yeah, there's different schools of thought to that too, right? Some people will say, hey, keep the full-time job until you match it. Some people just want to go for it right away and take that risk. So I don't think there's a right answer to that. But for you, it sounded like you got to a point where you're matching your full-time income. And that was the moment you're like, hey, I'm going to go off and go all in on the private practice.
Yeah. And for me, I'm really risk averse. Like, I pay down student loan debt. I don't take on like credit card debt. So I tend to, that's just my natural kind of inclination. My wife would have had me leave that job a year earlier, but she's a stay-at-home mom, and we have 2 kids. So for me, it was a really big deal to say I'm going to leave this, and I had to really change my mindset. My dad worked for the school system. My mom was a school nurse. Both of my in-laws, they worked for the schools. So all of the adults in my life were like, get a job, work for somebody else, like retire with a good pension. So I had no entrepreneurs to really look to. They offered a lot of other good things, but for me, that was a huge jump and a huge mindset shift. And as well, 2012 was a really rough year for us. That year, my daughter, right before her first birthday, she had open heart surgery. And then probably 2 weeks after we got the all clear from that, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And so I went through cancer treatment. I saw how expensive that would have been if we didn't have quality insurance. My wife had a miscarriage. My mom had a heart attack. And so it's like, we really kind of had to emotionally rebuild from that too. And so just being able to go to that full-time job and not have it all be on my shoulders at that point, like I kind of had to like bounce back emotionally from that to really feel like, okay, it's healthy for me to leave this job and I want to go and kind of launch my own thing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate you opening up about the personal things that happened back in 2012. So those experiences, did they impact you in moving forward in your business and your life? Like, what kind of impact did that have on you?
Yeah, I think that so 2012 is when I launched Practice of the Practice, and I launched it really early on in 2012. So I knew my daughter was going to be having heart surgery. We thought it was going to be a really simple version of it, but it ended up being way more complex. And so I launched this website just with the idea of, if I want to build kind of scalable income that's not just based on me showing up to counseling and getting a certain amount, because with that model, the only way to make more money is to see more people or raise your rates. And like, I wasn't interested in that burnout. So Practice of the Practice for me was a way to really level up and to improve my lifestyle, improve my income, and also my impact on the world. But I had to ask myself during 2012, why am I spending time on this website or on this blog post or planning this podcast when my daughter's about to have heart surgery? I'm going to have cancer treatment, all these other things. So it started in me something that, I'd never wish on somebody else, but I really had to say, what's going to move the needle forward? I could go spend an hour hanging out with my daughter or an hour on this blog post. Now, this blog post better help me out with my bottom line more than just playing with my daughter. And so that mindset for me, I think, has really helped me, where I evaluate my time in a really brutal way, where I say, should I be doing this or can I outsource it? So for example, right before this podcast, one of my assistants came in. She just started taking over picking up drinks for our lobby. So we have Starbucks, LaCroix, coconut water for our clients that come into our practice. I had done that for years, where I went to Sam's Club, bought all this stuff, and finally I trained her. Here's what I want you to do. And she was lamenting about how, wow, this is like a really big job to move all these drinks up here. And I'm like, why didn't I do that years ago? I'm on a podcast with you, which to me is going to help my career. It's going to help your audience. Or I could have been moving drinks up the elevator. You know what I mean? So Absolutely. Brutally asking myself, is this going to help my career? Or am I getting in the way of my own growth?
Those are great tips. And it's not just the opportunity cost of the time. This is the mental energy. Like, if you hate design and you're a therapist out there that wants to build your own website, but it drains you, it's not just the time that you waste on it. We can do other things, but it's also the mental energy it takes to think about it, plan it. And so I definitely can relate. And those are great tips for our audience.
Yeah, because I mean, there's those things that you hate doing that it's easy to outsource. Like if you hate design or you're really bad at it, and everybody's like, "Eh, that kind of stinks." Yeah, that's easy to outsource. For me, what's hard is those things that you really love doing and fill you up, but you probably shouldn't be doing. So for me, design, art, I've always loved like art and design and all of that. So for me to outsource all of my podcast design and stuff was really hard for me because I had to give up 3 hours of my week, which is great to get those back, but I got some fulfillment out of that. But in order for me to continue to make the most out of the 3 days a week that I work, I have to be cutting back as much as I can.
Got it. Got it. If we could just back up a little bit and talk about when you first started your private practice, you still had your full-time job. You were growing your practice. You were getting a few clients here and it started to grow. What did you do during that time to start getting a full practice and maybe your first, 5 to 20 sessions per week?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you what I did and why it was terrible. And
Okay, that
hopefully
works.
your people can learn from me screwing up a whole bunch of things and save time.
Appreciate that.
So, yeah. So the first thing is looking at your website. And so I created a website using Microsoft Office Live, which looked terrible. I didn't know anything about SEO. I didn't learn about SEO. I took forever. I bootstrapped everything, which is good when you're first starting out to keep your costs low. But I could have had a much better looking website if I had somebody else help me out with it. Maybe it's that they just helped a little bit or did some design update. So right away, I'd say if you're not very good at website design, it's probably worth spending $59 a month or $1,000 to pay someone to create a great looking website for you. And I would say that's one of the few places I'd say put money in right away, because if you're not good at it, it's going to really show. And if you turn away a client because it looks bad, that client could be worth a lot of money. If they come to 6 sessions and you're charging $100 a session, that's $600 you lose per client. And so I definitely did it myself for a long period of time and just got a couple clients, whereas those that kind of update their website really quickly, they tend to grow a lot faster.
Okay, got it.
Second, I didn't start blogging on a regular basis on my website for about a year. And as soon as I started doing some intentional SEO, blogging around keywords, focusing, I went from the bottom of page 3 when you search Traverse City Counseling to the top of page 1 within 6 weeks. And so really effective blogging, making content on the website that's applicable to your ideal client, to me is one of the first things that I wish I had done as well. And then I'd say the last tip is really intentionally thinking about who you want to attract. I think a lot of times people are worried about if I niche down or if I have a specialty, I'm going to alienate all these people. But the reality of it is, like, think about even just like if you go to a restaurant, for example, if you go to like a Burger King and you say, you know what, I want some fine French food. Could you guys whip up some fine French food? They're going to be like, no, right? So, but if you went to a really fine dining restaurant and your father-in-law comes with you and he just wants a burger, they're probably going to be pretty good at making a burger, even if it's not on their menu, because they're trained in fine French cooking. So the same is true when you specialize. People make that assumption of if you are amazing at couples work, or you specialize in helping angry teenagers or people that cut or whatever your specialty is, people will assume that you're awesome at a whole bunch of other areas. So if he can handle couples that are really fighting all the time, he's probably okay with helping people with depression or anxiety or other things going on in their life. So focusing on who you want to attract and then thinking who's connected to that person. So is it a pastor? Is it a yoga teacher? Is it professors, teachers, principals? Who is it that when they have something going on, some big pain in their life, who is it that they vent to? And when they vent, what are they saying? And that becomes your blog post, that becomes your marketing materials, that becomes all the content to speak to that person's pain and then show them the outcomes of therapy that are going to help them get out of that pain.
Okay, so let me just recap. So the first thing is website. Maybe outsource that. Have a nice looking website so that you can attract clients there that way. Second one was to organic search engine optimization. So when Joe's talking about SEO, that's search engine optimization, using the right keywords so that you're ranked in Google. So Google will take certain keywords and instead of being on the 4th or 5th page, just by doing a couple different strategies, you can get on the first page of certain keywords. The keyword strings like Traverse City, therapist or counseling. And then lastly is finding the right types of clients. The fear there is a lot of people like, I don't want to be I don't want to just focus on this type of client, because if I do, then I'm not going to be able to see these types of clients. But that's not necessarily true. If you do find the right specialty, then you will attract other types of clients. You're not just going to be pigeonholed to that one type of niche.
Yeah, absolutely. Great summary.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem, Brian.
What's the so for the listener out there that's struggling with the business side, you know, they hear the business side, the marketing, those words, and they just feel this. I don't know if it's like it just brings up a lot of feelings. Like they don't want to be pushy, they don't want to be salesy, they want to be self-promotional. But the person that knows they have a lot to offer, like maybe what are some tips you would give to that person to start to the therapist that wants to shift into the business mindset and how to do that in the way that feels right to that therapist?
Yeah, so I used to be that way totally. Like, and I think that still creeps in sometimes. My senior year of high school going into college, that summer before going to college, all my friends were selling this new product that they were making all this money with. And they're like, you got to come sell this. I'm making all this money. And I sign up for it and I find out it's Kirby vacuum cleaners. So I sell these vacuum cleaners door to door where I like drive and like learn all these sales techniques. I didn't think it was worth $2,000. Some people out there might think that it's worth $2,000, but it felt really slimy to me to be going door to door with this vacuum cleaner, being like, let me just demonstrate it. I got to sell you this $2,000 vacuum. Like that's, to me, for my personality, the bad side of sales. It was a product I didn't believe in, a method that I didn't believe in, and an audience that didn't have the money. I mean, I was going to low income housing showing people how they could make money by spending $2,000 on this vacuum cleaner. So I felt terrible about it. Now, take the other side. When we look at counseling, I wholeheartedly believe in the counseling process. I have experienced counseling that's helped me. It's helped my marriage. Self-improvement is something that I highly value. I've done a lot of additional training. I'm going through Gottman's certification. I just finished level 1. I'm going to do level 2. So for me, I feel like I have the expertise. And then when I look at my audience, the people that need it, the kinds of people I'm attracting through my website, through referrals, are the people that genuinely have angry kids, they're frustrated parents, and they're distant couples. And they're people that I can help. So all those 3 areas that to me made it feel slimy when I was selling vacuum cleaners door to door now feels really good. And so when you believe in your quote product, which really is you, it's you and your skills and your ability to build that therapeutic relationship, it becomes a lot easier for that sales to happen. Excuse me. And so really looking at those 3 areas is, I think, one of the first steps that counselors can do to address that mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not necessarily like pushing people to do something they don't want. It's believing in you. I mean, you are your product or your service. It's you. And so if you believe in that, then you're going to have the inclination to be able to promote that in the right way just because you believe in that and just switching that mindset. You're not trying to convince people to do something they don't want to do. It's about offering that value that you have in yourself, all the training you went through, all the schooling, all the extra certifications. So all those things to be able to say, hey, this is what I do and I believe in it wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And it's like you think about, so recently I had a number of clients. There was this like wave of clients that were asking about doctors that didn't just prescribe psychotropic medication. They wanted alternatives to it. So they were interested in Chinese medicine, acupuncture, all these different approaches to mental health that went beyond just counseling. Mm-hmm. And the only naturopath that I had referred to, I hadn't had kind of the correspondence that I preferred. I didn't feel good about referring to them. So I didn't have anybody. So then I go to this local conference and this lady, Dr. Abigail, speaks from Sleeping Bear Natural Health. And she talks about all the science of it. So she like knows the chemistry and here's what works. And these herbs work with this. And I'm like blown away. And I've sent her probably 8 or 9 clients and have personally seen her. And also my wife has seen her. So let's think about that. So I wanted to have someone to refer to. And when I found out about her, I was thrilled. So I'm more than happy to refer to her because she's helping me look better as a clinician. So then thinking about all of your listeners, like who are the people that would be thrilled if they knew about you? So maybe you focus on teen girls that are cutting or have eating issues. Well, I'm sure every therapist in town doesn't treat that population. And if they get that type of client, they're going to be like, shoot, I got to find somebody to refer to. And they're going to be thrilled to refer to you. Now, if you aren't out there marketing yourself or at least building those relationships, talking with people, making sure your website's optimized for those terms, on local radio or however you get your name out there, you aren't helping those people. And also those referral sources are like, I don't know where to send you. I'm sorry. Like just Google it. So knowing that marketing is just telling people about what you do. And usually it's helping them feel relief because they actually have someone they can refer to around that specialty.
Yeah, absolutely. People need you out there when you're listening out there. They need your services. And that's a great way of framing it also. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
if we could switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your website, practiceofthepractice.com. Something that you do on your website that I really admire and like is that your income reports and how you actually post. You're very visible about the income you make in your consulting as well as your therapy private practice. So tell us a little bit about how that came about and why do you actually publish those and make them available for anybody to look at?
Yeah, so it's interesting. My wife and I have talked many times, like, at what point do you stop posting this? Like, it's kind of awkward locally, to have people know exactly how much I make. But to me, it starts with, we don't talk about money enough as counselors. And oftentimes there's a big money shame. Like, I shouldn't make money. This should be like my ministry rather than like my actual like job. Or occupation or business. But we don't say that about plumbers. We don't say that about people that fix our houses. We would never expect someone to, come in and fix our toilet for $20 an hour and negotiate down from $100 an hour. But for some reason, because we're aligning emotionally with people, we feel oftentimes this money mindset that is like, well, we shouldn't be charging as much as we're charging for this. So part of it was that. Also, I was really inspired by Pat Flynn and his Smart Passive Income podcast. Oh, yeah. Really early on, that he was like the first podcast that I binge listened to, and he posted his monthly income every single month. And for me, that was really inspiring to see him living out exactly what he was talking about. And so I genuinely just took that idea and applied it to Practice with a Practice. From the very first month that I opened, I said, okay, here's how I made money this month. I think my first month was $1,100 I made that month. And here's what I did. Here's how I grew my client base. Here's where the money's coming in. And then you can look how I think I don't know if I've hit a $30,000 month. I think 29,000 is the highest that I've had. So since 2012, I've had routinely over $20,000 months, most months of 2016. So I did 300 some $1,000. And it really is, if you look at it, it's just small growth over time. It's not that I went from $1,000 a month to 30 grand a month overnight. It's that you can really watch it grow. So for me, people can, maybe hear me on this podcast and they just get into Brian's podcast and like, oh my gosh, Joe Sanok, how did he do that? It didn't happen overnight. It's been like incremental changes, steps in front of myself each time, kind of cycling through how do I set, achieve, and outsource goals and just doing it over and over. And to me, my hope is that it inspires people to see that if you keep going at something, you're going to continue to grow and the finances are going to follow.
Yeah, and Joe publishes it from a few years ago, so you can actually see the growth and you can see the way that where it was. And then I think you finished up 2016 at like 323,000 for the year, something around there, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's really amazing.
It's mind blowing. Like, yeah. I mean, I think about my old college job, and I think I made 60 grand a year, and I was like, this is the golden ticket. Yeah. But really, and I'm used to now seeing my consulting clients, and it's not ever guaranteed, but most of them in the 6 months of consulting will like double or triple their digits. So, having someone like I had a consulting client that we just closed out yesterday. So 6 months of consulting, his goal when he started, so he was grossing, I think 120 grand when we started, and his goal was to hit 200 this year. And now he's on track to hit 300. And so it's just like these basic principles that when you really understand, almost like the hacks, it makes it so much easier to grow quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you're absolutely right. From a point you said earlier is that a lot of therapists feel like they're mutually exclusive. If I'm helping people, then I shouldn't be making money off of it. So there's this conflict there at times, but you're saying that, hey, that's not what it's about. It's about doing both. And they're not mutually exclusive things. They're things that can happen together, and you're living proof of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like the average counselor, if we kind of sketch out what that looks like, they're usually overwhelmed. Maybe they've worked at a nonprofit. They might be doing 5 or 6 sessions a week at their private practice. They really want to grow and leave that nonprofit. So what happens when you have healthy counselors that are working 50 or 60 hours a week? They're barely keeping up with their private practice. They're showing up to do their sessions. They're hustling on Saturday mornings and not spending time with their families. That's not sustainable. Like, to me, that's a chapter in a book. Like, there's definitely, you got to hustle, you got to sprint, you got to put in that time. Like, that is needed, but it can't be how you sustain. And so asking yourself, what's my exit strategy here to really grow into something different? The bottom line is it helps your income, it helps your influence, and then it helps your impact on the world. And the more that you can do that, the more you're going to continue to level up.
It's a good segue into the things that you're talking about pretty often, and we shared about it before we were recording, but the whole concept of slowing down. because as entrepreneurs, we're like always thinking about things, and we're go, 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 always looking at our cell phones. And we feel that when we're in that space of go, 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 that's actually going to be more productive for our life and our business. But you were sharing a lot about slowing down. So what is slowing down for you, and how can the therapist listening out there start to slow down in order to have more productivity in their business and life?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So when we look at the highest achievers in our society, so the Richard Bransons, the Steve Jobs, Winston Churchill, the most innovative thinkers of the 20th and 21st century have really clear slowdown habits. So Sir Richard Branson, he meditates and does yoga every single day. He starts off his day putting his best into his body. Steve Jobs, some of his most important meetings, he would do walking meetings, and often they would be barefoot on the grass. Winston Churchill, every single day, would take a nap, even during the war. And so when we see people that can do that much in regards to impacting our world that still found time to slow down, we kind of don't have an excuse to not do that. To think that we have to go at a certain pace is unsustainable in a lot of ways. So what I've done in my own life for probably 3 years on the weekend, there's a time that I kind of say I'm done with the work week. So it kind of varies. Some days it's Friday at noon, I'll check some email. Sometimes depending on things, it might be a little bit later. But I will intentionally say to my phone, my family, I am not going to check email. I'm not going to check social media. I'm not going to do business podcasts or anything that's business related. And then I don't come back to kind of that business thinking until usually Sunday afternoon. And there's some phases that I've observed that I go through and that I've noticed that most of my clients, when I work with consulting clients to slow down to spark more innovation, go through. So they start by, there's this like purging phase where you kind of have this compulsion to like pick up your phone. It's like my daughter goes to the other room and I'm like, oh, I should check Facebook. And it's like, oh, no, set your phone down, Joe. Like, this is not okay. Like, you are not doing this. So it's almost like you have this ongoing anxiety to get things done for your business, and you have to purge that out. And then it kind of moves into practices. And so finding things that will intentionally distract me from business, that will help me connect with my family and my friends. And so that can be having friends over for dinner and playing board games, or going to the children's museum, or something that kind of sets a clear boundary around that time. And then I think what naturally happens after you've gone through that purge and that practice is you naturally come into that presence. And what's cool about it is that those are usually when your best ideas come. I mean, you think about when you're in the shower and you have those ideas, or you're on a long drive and you decide to turn off the radio and you just let your mind kind of wander and jump around, or that moment before you fall asleep and you're like, oh my gosh, this idea that I've been thinking about all day, finally I know the answer. Like, when our brain slows down, it kind of scrapes away all of that busyness of life and allows those sparks of innovation to come out. And so that's where then, once those sparks come, we want to use that innovation in a very clear 7-step process to take that idea and really light it up.
That's so true, though. I was at some sort of like spa or something of that matter, and they actually had a shower pad in the shower. Someone created it. It's like a waterproof paper, waterproof pen, and all that. And we could actually write your ideas down in the shower in that spa. So it's interesting. You're right. In the quiet, that's where we get our inspiration. Whether you're it's like I get a lot of my inspiration when I'm hiking, or I'm taking my dog for a walk. It's not when I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, you look at the great religions of the world, you look at many of like the self-improvement, it's always like taking the ordinary, and then the extraordinary comes when we somehow remove ourselves from it. And so that can be in a variety of different ways, but slowing down is almost always a part of that.
Absolutely. Slow down for more productivity. That's a great point. And so for the listener out there that's listening to this episode, this interview, who would be an ideal person to contact you and reach out to you for your consulting services or any of the other services you have to offer?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on their price point. So I have a lot of digital services that walk people through exactly how to start a private practice. So I have a free 28-step checklist people can get over at practiceofthepractice.com/start. Then I have a few other kind of smaller products for people that just want to really bootstrap it to walk them through that. But kind of the ideal client in regards to consulting are people that are just starting a practice and they just want it to go really quickly. So I think about one of my consulting clients from Colorado who he contacted me before he started his practice. And within 18 months, he had a 14-person group practice after doing that. And so someone that really wants that rapid growth, like they're in it. They're not just kind of limping along and bootstrapping it. They're ready to go. On the other side is people that maybe have had a solo practice that's been really successful, and they're looking at leveling up in some form. So that might be adding clinicians to the practice, adding consulting, e-products, doing an e-course, something along those lines where they know that they've kind of got to the top of where they can get. So they're making six figures, but they know the only way to make more money with their current model is to see more people, and they're not willing to do that. And so they often contact me to say, okay, I'm ready to expand and I need your help to do that. So we walk through exactly how to do that. We use a project management system so that they know exactly what the one thing is that they need to do in between sessions.
Okay, so practiceofthepractice.com/, say that one more time.
Yeah, so /start would be for the 28-step checklist.
Okay.
For people that are interested in consulting, it'd be /consulting. So practiceofthepractice.com/consulting.
And you also have the #1 podcast for counselors, which is available on iTunes, Google Play Music as well?
Yep. It's all over the place. You can listen to it directly from the website. You can listen to it on whatever your favorite player is. It's on all of those. And then I also have a 3-part video series that helps people walk through exactly how to slow down to spark innovation. And then I share in there the 7 practices of the practice, which is how you plan, achieve, and outsource any goal that you're working on. You can go get that over at practiceofthepractice.com/slowdown-video.
Slow down video. And then could you tell us a little bit, you have an event, a live event in 2017, which is in a few months when I was recording this. So tell us a little about the live event.
Yeah, so I'm doing this conference this summer. Kelly Higdon's joining me from Zinni.me, and I'm so excited about it. So it's kind of taking these ideas of slowing down to spark innovation to really address how do you grow that business and level up. So if you're just starting a practice, what do you do? If you have one that's growing, what do you do? So on the first day of it, on that Monday, we're kicking off with kind of happy hour the night before on the Sunday of it, on the 30th of July. And then on the first day of it, we're slowing down. We're going to go for hikes. We're going to go stand up paddleboarding, really kind of teaching you, like, turn off your phone. Like, we're going to have to set up the system so that you don't lose money while you have your phone off. Everyone's going to have my cell phone number. So if they have an emergency, they can call me. And then on the second day, we're going to do a bunch of activities that really kind of puts into practice that slowing down. And so we're going to be doing yoga. We're going to do some mindfulness. We're going to do some creativity exercises to get us thinking differently about our businesses. Day 3 of it is going to be really lighting up those goals. And so, like, how do we start to really plan those out and plan for success? As well, the first 10 people are going to get videos created by Kupla Media. And so people will be creating their 1-minute promo videos on Wednesday. And then Thursday and Friday, we're going to do group consulting with Kelly and with me, where we're going to be really diving into the nuts and bolts of what the plan has to be for business growth. And then that afternoon, we're going to go wine tasting throughout Northern Michigan and kind of have some casual time together. But really, like, Kelly and I are still on. Like, people can ask us questions rapid fire for the whole afternoon while we're wine tasting. So it's a really unique event. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be right on the water. Everything's included: food, lodging, the conference. And so slowdownschool.com is where people can find out more about that conference.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Well, Joe, I appreciate your time, and quite an honor to have you on the show. I appreciate your giving attitude as well. Before we were recording, Joe's like, how can I help you? How can I help you? And I'm like, wow, I appreciate that. So I appreciate your attitude, your wisdom, and just all the value you've given to us listening in.
Oh, thanks so much. And I'm excited to see this podcast grow.
Thanks so much.